I'd like to welcome you all to this educational seminar this afternoon, Cow Herd Nutrition. We have Dr. Doug Hawkins from Land O Lakes Purina. He's going to talk to us about good cattle health and nutrition, which is the foundation for a solid cattle operation. He's also going to discuss how a balanced diet and cost-effective nutrition program is essential to the success of beef cattle operations. And so I will let Dr. Hawkins introduce himself a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about himself, and we'll have a good presentation this afternoon.
Thanks, Lance. Can everybody hear me okay? I tell everybody I'm just an overeducated cowboy, grew up in Texas Panhandle. And pull this down a little bit, it's not so loud. And grew up in Texas Panhandle, little town called Clarendon. My dad was a college professor up there, trained livestock judging team. Went to school there, got my bachelor's from Texas Tech, and my master's and PhD from Texas A&M. I've been with Purina for almost 20 years now, and I've worked with a few of you in here. Y'all probably heard me talk here and there. So before we get started, you always got to hear a good story at one of these things. You know, you might not get anything on my presentation, but you got to hear a good story that you can take back home. Well, growing up in Clarendon, Texas, up in the Panhandle, small rural community, there's a college up there, Clarendon College, and my dad was a professor up there. And he taught with a gentleman named Curtis Schaefer, who was an animal breeder and geneticist. And he was doing all kinds of crossbreeding programs in cattle, working on hybrid vigor and everything, something that you Beefmaster people know a little bit about. And anyway, he was really, really smart, really, really sharp. Well, I've got an older brother who's a dean at West Texas A&M University in Canyon, and my brother and I ran around with this Curtis Schaefer's two sons, but Curtis Schaefer had 3 sons, and the 2 oldest sons were my brother and I's best friends. We competed with them in 4-H and FFA and athletics, and we just, you know, we're good friends, but it's one of those deals, small town, you grew up, you just competed with each other and everything. Well, those 2 other brothers, they had a little brother who was dumb as a box of rocks, little bitty guy, couldn't hold down a job, was always in trouble, and he was just the misfit out of all of us, you know. And the dad, being an animal breeder and geneticist, could never figure out how he could have two sons that were just all-American kids, that, you know, perfect sons, and he had this 3rd son that was just, you know, just a misfit. Couldn't figure it out. Well, he came down with terminal illness, and he was in hospice. He was on his deathbed, and his pastor was in the room with him, and his wife was in the room with him also, and the pastor says, well, you got any questions or anything and everything? He said, well, there's one thing I need to ask my wife. And he said, honey, you know, we've been married for almost 50 years, and we've had a wonderful life, had 3 sons and everything, and you know, our 2 oldest sons, man, they're all-American kids. I couldn't ask for anything more out of these 2 kids, you know. And he said the little one, he said, I just don't understand what went wrong there, you know, and everything, being an animal breeder, geneticist, I just don't understand. He said, I need to know one thing before I pass away. She looks at her husband there, laying there, and she goes, what's that? He goes, well, is that really my son? And she looked at him and says, well, yeah, that's really your son. He goes, well, just being an animal breeder, geneticist, I just don't understand that. I guess I'll have to ask the good Lord when I pass away. So eventually he passed away and everything, and the wife's kind of grieving. The pastor was there, and the wife goes to the pastor, well, Pastor, I got to confess before we leave this room. I got to tell you one thing. Those older 2 sons really weren't his sons. So we think a lot about bulls, you know, in this deal, you know, but we got to think about the cow and taking care of that cow. So we're going to talk a little bit about cow nutrition. I'll get out there. Now, we talk about growth rates and things like that, but if you're in the cattle industry, you guys talk about the reproductive rate of your herd. Still, reproductive efficiency is your #1 thing you got to really look at. You got to have cows that are fertile, come back and heat quick, breed up quick, have a live calf, and wean a calf. It's pretty important. The second thing is the growth rate of that calf from birth to weaning. That calf hits the ground, it's got to grow and get going, because most of our producers out there today still sell at weaning. So you got to have a big calf at weaning. Beefmaster breed does that. So another thing is efficiency of feed utilization. The number one bill that all you guys have out there that you have to pay for every year is probably what? Your feed bill, isn't it? So you got to worry about that feed bill. So you got to get the most out of your feed and make it efficient as you can to be productive. Now, let's talk about reproductive efficiency. The key to reproductive efficiency is you want to try to have a calf every year. To do that, that cow has to have a calf every 365 days. To do that, she has to breed back within 83 days of calving. All right, the first 40 to 45 days after she has a calf, she's not even thinking about cycling. Her uterus is going through involution. She's trying to heal back up, so she's not even thinking about that. So usually cows don't peak until they start peaking their cyclicity until about 70 days postpartum. So when she has that calf, you only really got about 1 or 2 heat cycles to get that cow bred back in 365 days. So to do that, that cow's be in good body shape. She has to be in good condition to get her bred back pretty quick to have a calf every year. Now, another thing we want to look at your forage. When we think about your forage, we're going to look at your cow appearance, stage of production, cow nutrition requirements, and feeding rates. If I go onto a producer's herd, whether it's cow calf, stalker, or even a purebred operation, I'm going to look at all these things. When we look at forage, we break it down into 3 different areas of forage. Okay, we keep it pretty simple because your forage is always changing. You know, you go out there today and go out there tomorrow, it's probably even changed if you got a rain. There's things that change that forage consistently. Now, we look at the forage, we break it down into 3 different categories. The first one's vegetative forage. That's where you have like small grain, oats, ryegrass, wheat, Bermuda grass a few weeks of the year. It's really leafy material, not very much stem. 30 to 55% dry matter. It runs about 10 to 18% crude protein. TDN, which is total digestible nutrients, this is what we measure energy in, is running 65 to 75% total digestible nutrients, which is really good. And on a percent body weight on dry matter, those cows can eat 2.3 to 3% of their body weight. So a cow can eat over 30 pounds of dry matter. That forage is pretty good. And not basically all you really need to give that cow is a good mineral source there. Now, we get into our transitional forage. Okay, this is where most of our hay comes into play. Most of our hay is transitional. Our native improved grasses, hay, you got a lot less leaf, you get a little more stem, you don't have the seed head yet, you got more dry matter in there, your crude protein drops to about 6 to 9% crude protein. Total digestible nutrients, energy is about 50 to 60%. That cow can eat 1.9 to 2.2% of her body weight. So that cow now can eat about 22 to 25 pounds of a dry matter volume. And then this is where we really start looking at supplementation of our cows. This is when we need to start thinking about supplementing our cows. Then we get into reproductive forage. And this is when there's you get in a dormant stage, you get a seed head, not much leaf, mostly stem. Dry matter is about 80 to 90% dry matter. Protein drops to less than 5%. Now your energy has dropped to 40 to 50%. Now a cow can only eat about 1.3 to 1.8% of her body weight. And then we need to really look at our supplementation program there. Now, to think about this, if you go out there, how do you know what your forage is without pulling a sample? I encourage you to test your hay and know where your hay is and feed your hay, your better hay, to heifers or cows that may need it that way. But just looking at your pastures, how do you know? When I go onto a producer's operation, how do I know? I look at the manure. All right, and think about manure. Vegetative. Have you ever seen cows on ryegrass or wheat or oats? What's the manure doing coming out the back end? What does it look like? Green, coming out pretty lush. Why? It's got a lot of moisture in it, high moisture. Okay, it's very high energy. There's not much lignin and cellulose. Sometimes you have to feed them some dry matter like some hay to kind of slow them down, slow down that digestibility. Okay, now let's look at transitional. What does it look like? Man, you got a nice round patty. You know, it's maybe about an inch thick. kind of make a nice round palace, kind of indent in the middle. That's what that should look like. You're getting a little bit more lignin, cellulose, a little more fiber on it. And then when we get onto reproductive forage, what does it look like? Say August, September, when it's hot and dry, what does it do? Start stacking up. Winter, after you get January, February, what does it do? Start stacking up. Okay, so think about that. Now, another thing you think about is that these cows can eat less and less as the quality of that forage goes down. We want them to eat more. So what we do is we tend to supplement these cows to get more forage intake. So we can bump up their forage. We try to meet their nutritional requirements doing that. So they can go from 2.5% to 3% of their body weight all the way down to 1.5% to 1.8% of their body weight, just because it's a lower quality. It takes longer for the microbes in the rumen to digest it and utilize it and go out the back end. We're trying to increase that. So we want to try to feed the rumen microbes to get more of that poor quality forage in them. Rule of thumb, how do we know when to provide supplemental nutrients to cows? When do we know? Well, kind of rule of thumb is usually when crude protein, your forages drop to about 7 to 8% crude protein. That's when we need to start looking at supplementation. Usually it's after a frost in the winter, late November, December. It goes through that, what we call reproductive stage, dormant stage, or during a dry period. A lot of us need to be supplementing our cows probably July, August, September when it gets hot and dry. Okay, something else to think about it. How many of y'all have calves on your cows in July, August, and September? But you probably still, so you think those cows are still trying to milk, got a big old calf on them, and your forage is down there in that reproductive stage. We need to be supplementing those cows, or you probably need to wean those calves and get them off those cows because your forage isn't very good during that time period. So it's really hard to know just by eyeballing the forage situation when you need a supplement to do that. How does the cow tell you she's lacking nutrients? She starts losing body condition score. That body condition score is a very good barometer of her fertility and also of her milk production. So we need to pay attention to that body condition score. I tell people 85% of the cows out there are in a body condition score 4, 5, and 6. You need to go out there and you need to, once a month, every other month, go out there and take body condition scores, look at those cows, look at those conditions. Now, can anybody tell me, say, I've got a body condition score 4. I want to get her to a body condition score 5. How many pounds of body weight does that cow need to gain to get to body condition score 4 to 5? Any idea? Anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds, okay? So if we want to do that in a month, that cow's got to gain 2 pounds a day. We got to pull her a lot of groceries to her to get a cow to gain 2 pounds a day. It takes a lot of nutrition to do that. Say, well, we want to get her to body condition score 6. Well, now that cow has to gain 120 plus pounds to do that. You going to do it in a month? Probably not. It's going to probably take 2 or 3 months. So it's always better to try to keep your cows in a good body condition score than actually let them slip, because it's going to cost you money to get them here, unless it's just happened to be a time of year where you got some really good forages. Last few years, we managed to kind of catch up in a lot of areas, do that. But if you're in a droughty situation, you're trying to get that cow from a 4 to 5 or hold her there, it's going to cost a little bit to do that. Now, this is what I tell people. Body condition score goals. When those cows calve, we want them in a body condition score 6 when they calve. Okay? Why? Because you want them in good shape, because remember, they got to breed back within, you only got 83 days to breed them back. You want them in a body condition score. You want them as close to body condition score. When they have that calf, they're going to drop about half a body condition score overnight before it's going on. So we got to try to keep them, when they calve, to be in a good body condition score then. Then when we wean, it's okay to let them slip to a 5. That means they've been working. They're milking. Those calves are pulling on them, especially got big calves on them. So I don't mind letting them slip as long as you get them bred back as quick as you can. And that's why we need them around a body condition score 6, okay? Your fertility goes down quite a bit when you get in a body condition score 5 or less. So I tell people, if your cows are over a body condition score 6, there's 2 things. She hadn't had a calf in probably 2 or 3 years, or she's your wife's pet and her name's got a Bossy or Betty or something like that, and you're feeding her a lot more so than she needs. So there's all those pet cows out there. Now, let's look at stage of cow production. All these 3 stages have different nutrient requirements to them. I break it down to 3 different types: early gestation and maintenance, okay? Last third of gestation, and then you have average lactation with average milk production, okay? So those are the 3 different types of stages productions. Now, if we look at this slide here, we got 3 different size cows. We got a 1,000-pound cow, 1,100-pound cow, 1,200-pound cow, and for a lot of us out there, maybe 13, 14, 15, 1,600-pound cow. There's not very many 1,000-pound cows out there anymore, is there? Okay, so we break them down to gestation, maintenance, last third gestation, lactating. As you go from gestation to maintenance down to lactation, your crude protein requirements that cow goes up. Also, her energy requirements go up as well, and her phosphorus requirements go up. And as bigger the cow gets, the more her requirements go up. But if you're trying to figure this up at home, rule of thumb, a cow needs about 2 pounds of total protein, give or take a half a pound. So if you're doing it, you kind of know what your forage is, how much hay she's eating, how much supplementation does she need to get. It's about 2 pounds of total protein per cow. How much energy does she need? It's about 1% of her total body weight. So if you look here, a 1,200-pound cow, she needs about 12 pounds, give or take, and she's lactating of 1% of her body weight of TDN, total digestible nutrients. If she's behind, you're trying to get weight on her, it may need to be 13 or 14 pounds of TDN, total digestible nutrients, to get in that cow to do that. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about products and programs. Now, the thing about Purina, we're all about products, we're all about programs, and I think that you need to look at that. So I'm going to ask everybody a question and think about it. You don't have to answer me. How do you supplement your cows? You use cubes, liquids, blocks, tubs, salt mills, commodities. I've worked with all of them. You know, I learned to drive a pickup up in Texas Panhandle feeding the cubes to cows, you know, things like that. So, and there's a lot of different ways to feed cows out there, a lot of different products, even more than these. No. So why do you feed those products? Okay? Why do you feed the products that are on the previous slide? Do you price? You go in and say, I want 20% cube. Well, we got 3 different 20% cubes. Which one do you want? I'll take the cheapest one. Why do you want the cheapest one? They're all 20% cubes, but which one do you think has the most energy in it? The tag does not tell you what the energy is. None of these products have energy on them, do they? No, they're all just protein. So the thing about the feed industry, it's a commodity industry. It's driven by volume. It's high volume, low margin type of business. You're usually going to pay for what you get. Performance. Where do you want performance? Well, you know, if you're developing bulls or developing heifers, you want some performance. So maybe you're feeding your products to feed to get performance. Maybe you want your bulls to gain 3 or 4 pounds a day when you're developing them. Maybe you don't. So maybe it's convenience. Well, I got a full-time job. Okay. I do this because I like a hobby, you know. What we have coming up in a couple of weeks, time change. When it gets time change, what time does it get dark? Pretty early. What time do I get off work? 5 o'clock. I go feed cows, it's dark. Okay, so I'll have a chance to go out there or there. I'm chasing kids. I got young kids, we play sports, can't go out there and feed them. Might not be around, I travel quite a bit. So maybe I'll put a liquid or block or tub out there because it's convenient. All right, there's some convenience factor to it. Tradition, I tell people I grew up in the Texas Panhandle. Everybody's got a flatbed pickup, a cube hopper, and a blue heeler dog in the back. You know, that's tradition. That's just what they do up there. Labor, the big ranches I work with, that's big hit, labor. You know, finding good help to drive around a $40,000, $50,000 pickup, looking at cows, feeding them, that's kind of hard to do. You know, those guys can go to Walmart or go somewhere else, get full benefits, and, you know, work 40 hours a week and make more money than they can being a cowboy. So labor is a big issue on a lot of ranches I work with. Some people do not know any better. You know, just listen to conversations. They hear people talk about nutrition, what they're doing. I was like, that's not quite right. But they're talking, and you hear a lot of coffee shop chatter, and just do it because somebody else is doing it. Location, availability, you know, and has to do with a lot about products and how you feed your cows as well. So, man, there's no right or wrong way you feed a cow and what products you use. You need to make sure you follow a program that fits for you and fits for your area and your cow herd to make your cows perform. Now, just don't settle on what I call the it'll do attitude. This is actually, in my hometown of Clarendon, Texas, the It'll Do Motel. All right? There's the It'll Do Motel. And trust me, it will not do. I wouldn't stay there if you paid me enough, so it won't do. So the thing about Purina, we've been doing research on cow nutrition since 1926. We have more products available, more programs available than anybody else is out there. So we know a lot about nutrition. That's what we do. Now, I always get the question, what's the cheapest, most economical way for me to feed a cow? Now, I'll tell you this. It's liquid. Liquid's the most economical and performance-enhancing way to feed a cow. That is if you are feeding the right liquid. There's a lot of liquids out there, and we make them. I'll show you some. We make some cheap liquids out there. So I tell people, why? What makes them different? Well, I'll tell you, if you use straight molasses, no byproducts. Byproducts, I'll show you another slide why byproducts won't work. Moisture, they need to be very low moisture. You don't need a high moisture type of liquid out there. You need a high quality fat source. And probably one of the key ones out there, it's got to control intake. There's some of these liquids out there, cows just spin the wheel on it and won't control intake. Now, we look at the liquid byproducts out there, I say straight molasses. Why do you need straight molasses? If you look at molasses here, it's at 26 to 28% moisture. That's, you know, you got to think, it's 25, you know, that's over a quarter of its water, about a third of its water, okay? Dry matter, 72 to 74. Total digestible nutrients, about 57%. That's about as good as your transitional hay or transitional forage that you're feeding, okay? If you put that TD into the forage. Okay, there's all different types of byproducts. These are a few that are out there. Corn steep liquor, condensed corn distiller solubles, condensed whey, another product called proteoferm, wood molasses, beet filtrate. There's a lot of different byproducts of the molasses industry. Now notice, whenever they do something to the byproducts of these things, what happens to your moisture? It almost doubles, doesn't it? When your moisture doubles, what does your energy do to that liquid? It drops it down to almost half right here. 57% to 26, 32, 21, 28, 25, 18. So that's why some of these aren't too bad. The wood molasses isn't too bad. But that's one thing you got to watch out, how much energy is actually in that liquid. Now, you can use it as a protein supplementation, but why not using your liquid as an energy supplementation too? That's why we like to use straight molasses in some products that are out there. Now, we've looked at a lot of feeds in the industry. We analyzed them and say, hey, during the winter, we take the best liquid out there based off of value, what it has, how much fat things in it. Say that cow eats 2.5 pounds of that best value liquid out there. There's a lot of these out there. Well, some of these you may have to eat twice as much, 3 times as much, 4 times as much to get the same performance on the energy value as out there. So you kind of pay for what you get in this deal. This one may be twice as much as some of these, but the thing about it, they're going to eat half as much. You got to be able to control intake though to do that. All right. So now, like I said, we've got good liquids up here, and we've got street fighter cheap liquids. What makes these are Purina liquids. I'm going to tell you the difference between our good liquids and our cheap liquids, okay? All of our good liquids here will have 16 to 32% protein in there. They'll have 10% fat, 29% moisture, and 1% phosphorus. That is actually supposed to be over there, 1% phosphorus. Now, what happens when you take fat and mix it with a liquid like water? Put fat and water together, what happens to them? They separate. All right, we got patented technology, we can keep that suspended. So you got to have a way to suspend that fat, or to do that. For a long time, we ran a 5% fat, we managed to get to 10% fat. So, this used to be the old Superlick. So we have a 5% fat here. Then we have another one here, Forage Balancer 3 High E. It's a 32 protein, it's a 3 fat, and it's a 32% moisture. What makes this one cheaper than these? Well, it's got less fat in it, and it's got more moisture in it, and no phosphorus. Then we get down to Rangeland, 32.5, 32. This one's got 5% fat in it, but it's cheaper than this one because we're using some corn steep liquor in there. All right? So we're using some byproducts in that one, make it cheaper. And then we got this, a compensator. I call this a street fighter. It's cheap. No fat, 32% moisture, no phosphorus, and use lots of byproducts. So we've got them cheapened. We prefer to use the ones that we know can help control intake, ones that are high fat, high energy, and use as a protein source there. Now, this is what a pasture should look like if you're on a premium liquid, okay? That's what it looks like. This is what a pasture will look like if you're on a cheap liquid. We do trials all the time against cheap liquids. This is actually in Florida, right? And there's a lot of cheap liquid in Florida. What does that pasture right there tell you? Those cows are camping around that feeder, and they're not going very far to graze, are they? All right, see the manure stacking up. They're just hammering that forage right there. Grazing, they're out hustling grass. So there's a difference in there. There's some things to look for. But you got to be a way to measure and monitor your consumption and intake. I tell you, our liquids weigh about 10.8 pounds to a gallon. We measure it out, and we do trials against it. So if you want to try one of our liquids, you're on another liquid, or you want to say, hey, I think this liquid's better than Purina's. I want to try it. Take a set of cows, put up and monitor your liquid intake, and do that. Try it on your own. That's the list for me. Now, that's just a little bit about liquid. You know, how much liquid does a cow eat a year? We can feed cows year-round for less from about $75 to $100 a cow, pretty much anywhere. That's what it costs if you keep it out year-round. All right. Average intake's about a pound per cow per head. Per year, so we do it for 365 to 400 pounds a year. We'll feed a cow. It's better. We prefer to leave it out year-round on that type of program. Now, what if you don't have liquid available in your area? And what if you say, I really don't like liquid. I want to use a block or tub. That kind of works for me. There's a lot of differences in blocks and tubs that are out there that people don't know about. The traditional ones are press blocks, which are small blocks, kind of pressed together with heat and steam, things like that. The big one that's out there that a lot of people have are these dehydrated and baked blocks or tubs. And then another one, there's some others out there called poured blocks or poured tubs. And I'll talk a little bit about what makes some of these different. Now, a press block is formed by applying pressure and heat to dry ingredients. So they'll take dry ingredients, wheat, mids, corn, grain, sorghum, whatever, put molasses to it, heat it up, put salt in there, control it. They're very weather intolerant. You put them out there, they're going to have meat melt in them. Control the intake, usually about 15 to 30% salt, how hard they are, number of blocks. So these are out there. There's not very many of these blocks in the industry anymore. We make very few of them. They've about gone away. The other type of block that's out there is baked dehydrated. This is probably the hottest area on baked blocks and tubs, and I'm not a real fan. We've got them, and they do well in certain areas, but I'm not a real fan. I'll tell you why. What we do is they bake them, they pour the molasses in the deal, they bake out all the moisture, very low moisture, they're very high energy, but the intake is controlled by humidity, so if you're in a hot, humid area, the top of it will wick moisture, will make it a little softer. The temperature, saliva, how much cows are licking on it, the number of blocks, and location. Now, I'll tell people, if you read on a feed tag and it says a half a pound to 1 pound consumption, then it's probably a baked block. What regulates a half pound to 1 pound consumption? I'll tell people it's the cow's tongue. She only lick on it about a half pound to a pound's worth before her tongue gets sore and tired and she gets tired of licking on it. She's got to go do something else. Okay? So The characteristics of these are usually the highest price block. They're very high energy, and consumption is normally half of that of other processes, which that consumption is a problem in certain times of the year. If you think about a half a pound consumption in the middle of winter when it's raining and cold, she's got a calf by her side, is that going to be enough? No. She's probably going backwards on body condition score. You better be feeding that cow some cubes or, doing some things to help her along. They're good to help maintain certain times of the year, and so these need some help. Now, concerns, low intakes, well, you can improve body condition score on these. You can kind of help maintain if you got some good hay, things like that. But low intakes, you can actually lose body condition on these type of blocks. Intake is not correlated with forage quality or quantity. You can put these blocks out in a wheat field when it's lush, and they're still going to eat a half a pound, because even though they don't need it. You put it out there when they need to eat 2 pounds or 3 pounds of a product, they're probably not going to eat enough. Okay, they're going to eat a half pound consumption no matter what, because they're that hard. And some of them, there's some that have returnable tubs, increased spreading disease. There's not very many of those out there anymore. That was kind of the big deal during the mad cow disease and things like that, but most of them are plastic. Most of plastic tubs are recyclable today. Pour block technology. Purina came up with pour block technology in the 1980s. And it was by accident. How did it come about? We were trying to add magnesium to a wheat pasture liquid, increase her mag, and there kind of prevent milk fever, things like that. So our guys at our research farm, they added magnesium oxide to our molasses in our liquid, and there was a chemical reaction. Next thing you know, that thing's setting up in our mixer, and they had to chisel it out. So they started playing around with it, and so they add magnesium oxide, and we can pour it into a cardboard tub, a plastic tub, and it sets up. So it uses a chemical reaction to set up. It's a softer than a bake block. Cows can eat, 2-3 pounds if they need to. Allows for higher consumption, so you can get more protein and energy in there. And they're moderate to high in energy depending on if they have a filler in it, what it is. So they have a high molasses content. You can put some other things in there like corn. They're very consistent in quality. A lot of times you can fortify them to meet the requirements. Most of them, some will have animal fat. Most everybody's gone to a vegetable fat, though, instead of animal fat. Consumption will vary depending on nutritional value of your forage. So if your forage is really good, they're going to probably kind of back off of them, not eat them. If forage is really bad, then they're probably going to eat a little bit, eat more of them. So most of the time they do not have very high levels of low-cost ingredients. Some people have put more fillers in there on that. The other one is a West Coast process. Some will use phosphoric acid, control intake, and with mag oxide or calcium sulfate to do that. And they usually have a little more fillers inside of them. So this is an example of 2 different type of blocks that are out there. Now, I talked about the bake blocks. These are our Rangeland blocks. These are Purina's bake blocks. These are our poured blocks, or accuration blocks. Now, if we want to look at energy requirement, a cow's energy requirement, say she's lactating, 1,300 pound cow, say she's lactating pretty good. She needs 16.24 pounds of energy. So that's somewhere right around in here. Well, if that cow is eating 1 pound of a bake block, she's getting 6 pounds of protein or crude protein or energy from that forage, and that should be energy, then she's not getting enough energy to meet her requirements. But if you feed her an accuration block or some type of a pour block where they can get 2 pounds, then that will meet her protein requirement or her energy requirement. Now, if we look at the protein requirements, it's the same thing on protein. You get closer on protein on this at 6% crude protein coming across. That cow needs about 2.5 pounds of protein. just from the forage, she's going to be a little bit deficient. At 1 pound, she's going to be pretty close on her crude protein requirements. But with these, even though these are a 30% protein, 38 protein, these are 25% protein, you get a little bit more. So it's pretty easy to meet a cow's crude protein requirements. It's the energy requirement we're trying to get in those cows. It's energy that those cows are usually lacking. So these are our poured blocks that we have: 25 protein, 10 fat, a 5 fat, and a 4 fat. Most everybody has gone to our AccuRation high fat block because the fat is very important when it comes to fertility. You'll see a lot more feeds, a lot more rations with the fat in there because what we're trying to do, we're trying to increase the cholesterol levels in those cows. You increase the cholesterol levels in those cows, it takes about 30 to 45 days to do that, and then you increase your steroid hormones like your estrogens and progesterones to help those cows cycle a little better. So that's one reason we try to do that. Now we have our Rangeland blocks. All my slides have moved on to me, but these are our bake blocks, 15, 25, 30, and we've got a 38 on there as well. Most of these run about 5% fat. We do have one that runs 12% fat on those. Now, that's a little bit about that. I didn't talk much about cubes. Thing about cubes, you're going to pay for what you get in the cube, okay? Because it is a commodity out there. It doesn't tell you how much energy is in there. If one's different than the others, it's probably a difference in there. There are some fillers people can put in there. They can put some magnesium mica in there, some bentonite, things like that, harden them up, some fillers. But usually on a cube, you're going to pay for what you get on those type of deals like that. Now, let's talk a little bit about mineral supplementation. It's kind of the spark that ignites your whole program. You need to always keep a good mineral program out there in front of them. What happens if you don't keep a mineral out? You'll see things like decreased weaning weight, small calves, decreased milk production, reduced later conception rates, poor immunity and sickness. This is kind of the big one that we're starting to really get into here, is that since they took away the antibiotics that we use a lot of times in our starting programs with the VFD, is that this immunity deal is very important. And for your vaccination program to work, for things like that, you need to make sure your cows are up to snuff, your calves are up to snuff on their mineral requirements. So if you're not kind of paying attention to your minerals, it's kind of a thief in the night that will steal from you. This is one of my favorite slides, is that if we look at effects of mineral deficiencies, what if you don't feed minerals? They'll say, even if you don't take a vitamin and mineral, we like to try to keep a cow's mineral status as high as we can, okay? Some days they may eat it every day, other days they may not eat mineral at all, but whatever we try to do, we want to try to keep our mineral status in those cows as high as we can. Cows on pasture, it's not an exact science. Dairy cows, feed yard cattle, it's an exact science. We can get down pretty close. But cows grazing pasture on forages, it's always changing. It's going to fluctuate. But we want to just make sure we keep that cow's mineral status as high as we can. And say, okay, we quit feeding minerals. Okay? All of a sudden, her mineral starts depleting. It starts going down in her body. And all of a sudden, we might see a decrease in her immunity in her calves. Okay, calves may start getting a little sicker, and all of a sudden they kind of quit growing. Heifers aren't near as fertile. Cows may not be fertile. And all of a sudden it crosses this magical line here, and then we see clinical signs. You may have more foot rot, more pink eye, more retained placentas, more, your vaccines aren't working, more respiratory disease, things start happening. So the main thing is we want to try to keep it as elevated as we can there. Now, what do cattle producers want from minerals? We've done a lot of surveys, done a lot of testing on minerals and everything. Number one is consistent intake. And I'll probably ask you guys, you want your cows to eat it, okay? They're either going to eat too much or they're not going to eat enough. I come across them every day. You get down here on the coast, this water's real brackish. It's hard to get cattle to eat mineral in this part of the country. So consistent intake is very important. Make sure they're properly balanced, proper nutrition. And another one is pretty become more, in the industry, weather resistant, how they handle to the weather resistant. A lot of good minerals out there today that are made to handle the wind, the rain, things like that that's out there. Now, another one's come up there are mineral tubs, and they're very consistent, and these work very good if you're trying to get fly control in your minerals or if your cows won't eat minerals very well. They're more expensive, they cost a lot more, but the thing I tell you about this is that there's some companies out there that have a mineral and a protein in one tub. There's not enough room in the formula for both of them, okay? So when they put them all together, they're either going to be shorting you on mineral or they're going to be shorting you on protein and energy. Okay, so you either need to have a protein energy tub and then you have a mineral tub. The one that's kind of put together, you're going to be shorting those cows one way or the other on that because there's not enough room in those formulas to get those cows what they need out there. Now, the problem with these feeders right here is that they turn over, they'll cold flow out. Kind of like those baked, they'll run out. So I always recommend putting those in a 20-inch tire. So if a bull knocks it over, a cow knocks it over, or they get low and the wind blows it, it won't end up in your stock tank or things like that. They'll just kind of keep them in place a little bit better. But these work very good on getting fly control in your cows if you're worried about horn flies. Now, how much does it cost for a horn fly control in there? If you keep a horn fly control out for your cows and the mineral, it's going to cost you about $10 a cow per year, and it's well worth the money to do that if you want to use Alticid or something like that. Now, when you formulate mineral supplementations, there's a lot of different interactions that are available. You know, we all know about calcium to phosphorus is pretty important. Potassium, magnesium is important there, especially you start getting on some wheat pasture, some lush grass. Molybdenum and sulfur will tie up copper. A lot of people don't know that a lot of your fertilizers use molybdenum as a carrier, use ammonium sulfate, those things like that can bind up a lot of your copper. So you say, hey, I might have a copper deficiency out there. Say I got some black cows, they got a red tinge of the hair coat. Well, I'm going to give them some more copper. I don't add copper, the mineral. Well, if you add copper, that mineral, you need to add some more zinc because you should have 3 to 5 parts more zinc than you should copper. That should be a 3 to 1 to 5 to 1 ratio there. So people forget about zinc, but zinc is pretty important. You throw those two out of whack, and it can actually cause some problems there. And then iron can tie up zinc and copper as well. So there's a lot of different interactions out there. Manganese is another one we're finding out. Selenium's another one, but we're regulated by the EPA on how much selenium we can put in the ration. Now, I tell everybody just needs to be on a good mineral program. You know, you need to try to be one that meets 100% on the trace minerals that are out there. One thing that most of the minerals out there today are still only balanced for a 1,000, 1,200 pound cow. Several years ago, Purina went out there and we balanced all of our minerals for a 1,400 pound cow. So if a cow eats it, we know 1,400 pound cow, she's getting enough. So you need to make sure that your mineral requirements are enough for your 1,400 pound cow, like I said. That's something to look at. If you're using fly control, make sure it's for a 1,400 pound cow, not a 1,000 pound cow. We had to go back to the FDA and EPA to get that clearance to do that too as well. So our cows are a lot bigger than they used to be, so our mineral requirements are a lot higher, and we need to try to meet those as well. A lot of this comes from the dairy industry, that if we have some problems like lower conception rates or lameness issues or poor health or retained placentas, we can kind of track it down to certain minerals there. We learned a lot of this from the dairy guys when it kind of comes over into the cattle side. I tell you the story that my 20 years working for Purina, somebody calls me up and say, I've got retained placentas. I can ask one question, I probably can get it answered. Are you feeding a salt meal or are you adding salt to your mineral? Something to do with salt will cause retained placentas. Think about that. So, don't know why, but it does. But we don't have very many people feed salt meal mixes anymore. Now, the thing about minerals is that it needs to be balanced mineral nutrition. Weather resistant, you need to make sure you get good consistent consumption. Use fly control and medication. A lot of people have them that are medicated. You have to have a veterinarian feed directive for your medicated mineral. Most time now it's for anaplasmosis to do that. So, mineral basics, cattle need minerals. Now, these are the macro minerals. The macro minerals are that phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sodium, chlorine, sulfur, magnesium. If you turn over and look at your feed tag, these are the ones that are expressed in percentages, okay? Percent calcium, percent phosphorus. These are the trace minerals, the micro minerals, and these are expressed in parts per million, very small amounts that are out there. These are ones that we try to hit. Now, the thing about mineral requirements, we really don't know much about mineral requirements. If you look at the macro minerals out there, there's really not much difference between growing cattle and gestation and lactating. There's a little bit of difference on the calcium and the phosphorus, but then there's really not much difference on the rest of these. You know, I think there are some differences out there, but just through the research, there's not a lot of difference that are out there. We look at the micro minerals, man, they're the same between growing cattle, gestation cattle, lactating cattle, and things like that. So I'm trying to tell you, if a company, feed company or mineral company comes out there and says, hey, let me test your forages, we can make a special mineral for you. Well, it's good to have them test your forage because you need to know what it is, but are they actually doing? No, they probably making the same mineral for everybody and just putting your name on it or something like that, because they're pretty generic. We try to hit the high things. It's not an exact science, and your forage is always changing on pasture cattle that are out there. Some things to look at when you're looking at minerals on feed tags is look at what we call the bioavailability of trace minerals. This is how readily absorbed they're absorbed in the cow. You have sulfated forms, oxide forms, carbonate forms, chloride forms, what I call organic forms that are out there. So let's take copper. Copper's kind of the big one we see out there. You can have a copper sulfate, you can have a copper oxide, and you can have a copper chloride out there, okay? If you feed your cow a mineral that has copper oxide in, she's only getting maybe 10% of that mineral being utilized. So what some companies will do, they'll put copper sulfate in it, copper oxide in it, and then they'll put copper chloride in there. But which one's the cheapest? Copper oxide. So they're probably putting more of that in there. They're just playing tag dressing on there. So kind of stay away from the oxides on any of your minerals. Now, most feed companies will use iron oxide. Why would a feed company use iron oxide in their mineral? What color is mineral? Red. They use it as a coloring agent. It doesn't tie anything up, doesn't bind anything up because it's iron oxide, and they'll use it as a coloring agent. See that out there. Now we get out this organic, you see those big numbers over there. Those are what we call our chelated or type of minerals or organic minerals that are out there. They are more bioavailable. What they do, they attach amino acid to it or a protein. When it goes through the body, it picks it up, it's more readily absorbed. Okay, now the thing about it, they can have organic trace minerals in there, but are they putting them in there at the recommended level that company recommends? Some people just put enough in there to say they have it in there. So the thing about these minerals and mineral tags, you need to make sure you're buying mineral from a reputable company that don't use a lot of oxides and putting the amount that they need in there, not playing some tag dressing games and making them cheaper there. So the thing about mineral, it's different than the feed industry. The mineral is a low volume industry with a high margin. So that's why you see a lot of guys sit on mineral, because they can make some money off of mineral, mix them together, because it's a low volume, high margin type of business that's out there. Now let's talk about phosphorus. If there's one mineral that you need to pay attention to, it's probably phosphorus, okay? It's kind of the key reproductive mineral that's out there. And this is kind of your phosphorus content in forage. In the spring goes up, we got really lush forages. It'll come down during the summer, and then it'll drop even down more during the winter, all right? Now, we know that we have a need for phosphorus. This is from the King Ranch data. Now, in 2008, do y'all remember what happened to phosphorus prices, fertilizer prices? What happened about 2008 fertilizer prices? Man, they everything up. What happened to mineral prices? Up. Our mineral goes from $800-900 a ton to $1,500-1,600-1,700 a ton. Okay? Big producers that we had say, hey, we're not going to feed you that mineral. It's too much. It's paid twice as much. I'm not going to feed mineral. We're going, hey, you need to feed a mineral You need to get your traces in there, like your copper, zinc, selenium, all those. You know you need those. You need to get some phosphorus in. So most everybody was feeding 12% mineral. So we dropped them down to 7.5% phosphorus. We saw no difference in performance, okay? So did that. And then we got to a drought of 2011. We had a lot of producers that was having some milk fever issues on cows. And milk fever is a combination of magnesium, calcium, potassium. So we needed up the magnesium. So then we went to a 5% phosphorus, 5% magnesium type of mineral. Went on it, a little cheaper. Man, saw no difference in performance in calf crop, cheaper, did it work very well. So we started looking at why, how much phosphorus does a cow really need? Where's it at? Well, we looked in our research, university research, couldn't ever figure it out, and finally we figured it out. The first phosphorus stuff started on the King Ranch back in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And they knew they had a phosphorus problem down there because they would see cows chewing on bones. At the same time, King Ranch owned farmland and ranches all over the world, Australia, Cuba, South America. And they knew that if they fertilized with phosphorus, they increased their crop production. They knew their cows had a phosphorus deficiency. So they did some trials where they took 4 calf crops at the King Ranch in the 1940s. They gave those cows a supplemental phosphorus at 6 pounds per year. So they just had 4 calf crops. They gave them 6 pounds of phosphorus, those cows, throughout the year. Did that. What did it do down there? If we look at percent calf crop wean, they went from the low 60s, and they jumped them up to almost 90% calf crop wean. It's quite a bit, isn't it? Then if you look at the weaning weight, their weaning weights went from about 490 pounds and jumped up to 540 pounds, about 50 pounds right there. So, hey, phosphorus is pretty important. Now, the key question, what were they using as their phosphorus source in the 1940s? Surely there's some old timers in here who's probably fed some of this stuff. What did you used to use for, what?
I heard somebody say bone meal.
Bone meal, there you go, bone meal. Bone meal used to be 12% phosphorus, exactly. So, use bone meal. Do we use bone meal today? Why? Mad cow disease, can't use bone meal. No, all right? Our phosphorus quality today is a lot better than it was back then. Most of our feeds will have phosphorus. Our liquids will have it, a lot of our tubs will have it, you'll have it more in the cubes. So our cows are a lot less phosphorus deficient than they used to be. So we can get by feeding a lower phosphorus mineral than we used to. So instead of feeding a 12, you can actually feed a 7.5 and maybe even a 5% phosphorus in there as well. So that's a little bit about phosphorus. Do what? We've got some suppliers, and where we get our phosphorus from is actually mined. It's mined, yes. And we test all of our, we make sure we have premium suppliers that we test all of our ingredients come from on our suppliers. We put them together, we test them. So they are mined. And now we talk about magnesium. Now, magnesium, I tell people, is that you need to feed magnesium if you got some really lush grass like wheat, oats, ryegrass, or maybe Bermuda grass a few months or a few weeks of the year. Most of it's on your winter crops. Magnesium has a palatability issue. Cows really doesn't like it very well. I tell people if you're going to feed a high mag mineral, feed it about a month before you get your green up of ryegrass or oats or wheat and turn those cows out on it, or feed it about a month before you start calving. You try to get them on that magnesium mineral and kind of get that magnesium stored up in their body so you won't run into things like milk fever, So, and you can run into some native pastures where you can have some magnesium deficiencies there, and that's what we're seeing during the drought. Now, what type of mineral program I tell folks to get on? If you got winter crops here, put them on high mag starting even as early as December or January. Feed them a high mag to about the 1st of May. The rest of the time, just feed them a good all-season mineral, a 5, 7, 12.5% or 12% phosphorus there. You start fly control in there, start it somewhere about March, and you go through October, November. Some of our guys in South Texas, they just feed it year-round because horn flies never disappear pretty much on that deal. So now let's talk a little bit about what we call sustained nutrition through year-round supplementation. Something just kind of think outside the box for me a little bit. Now, we traditionally feed cows supplements. When do we typically feed cows? That last trimester. That's when we typically feed them. That's when 2/3 of your fetal growth occurs. Protein, energy requirements, phosphorus requirements all increase during that time period. What about the first trimester and second trimester? We start looking about year-long supplementation is supplementing year-round. Well, I don't have that slide. So what's happening here during this time period here? During that first trimester, second trimester right in here, doesn't she have a calf by her side? Isn't that cow milking? So you're also feeding the cow. She's actually feeding two during this time period. She's got a calf by her side, and she's got a calf inside of her as well. So we think something about called fetal programming. And fetal programming is getting pretty big, and it is real. It's all in all species. A lot of the work was done during World War II when they first started really noticing it. There's a deal called the Dutch winter hunger. Dutch winter hunger, where there's a population of Dutch people that were, during the winter, the canals froze. Germans have a lot of things in their health on humans, but also in livestock as well. So when a woman becomes pregnant, what's the first thing the doctor tells her to start taking? Prenatal vitamins, exactly. So that nutrition is very important. Same thing on cows. It's pretty important. Now, I want to think outside the box again. You're keeping replacement heifers, all right? Fertility of those replacement heifers doesn't start when she hits the ground and how you develop her. It starts when she's inside that mama, okay? If you're keeping replacement heifers out during the drought, you go back and look, I bet some of the worst females in your herd came out, were probably born or in utero during the drought. I go to ranches, I see cows out there, I said, she was in utero in 2011, that's a 12 calf crop, whatever, and they said, yeah, you're right. You know, you can go out there and look at them because they're stressed in utero. It doesn't change with the DNA, but it's expressed how the DNA is expressed. They call it epigenetics. So we start looking at cattle going into the feed yard and performance and how those cows are fed, or those in utero, and have those calves become steer calves will marble better when they get into the carcass data. So it's not only steers, but it's heifers, bulls. Those animals start in utero. So how you feed those cows will affect your offspring in utero. So that fetal programming is real. So think a little bit about that. So better performance, if you feed a year-round product, you get consistent fetal nutrition in all 3 trimesters. You're also going to improve milk production, and you're going to decrease your postpartum interval. What does it cost? Say, well, I don't feed my cows year-round. Well, if you're on a good liquid program or block program, it's actually cheaper to keep those cows in good condition year-round than it is to let them lose weight and try to get them back up that body condition score 6. And you start feeding cows a liquid supplement or a block or a tub, a self-fed type of product like that. You put it out in December when it's cold and they're already behind. They're going to eat twice as much than they need to feed. We've had ranches that have fed for 150 days, and they've got good data on it, and they know exactly. We put them on year-round, their consumption drops quite a bit from a 150-day feeding program to a 365-day period. So it's actually cheaper to feed them year-round to do that. Just keep it out 24/7. We've seen increased weaning weights, increased conception rate. Year-round supplementation is the way to go. So this is what we're trying to get out here. You're nourishing the calf on the ground. You're also nourishing the fetus in the womb. and they're looking at milk production during that time period, use a product year-round on that. So summary, kind of wrap this deal up. The profitability of your cow-calf operation depends on the reproductive rate of the cow. You got to get her bred, make sure she's in good cow condition. That calf hits the ground. You need to give that calf every opportunity you can through milk production of the cow, creep feeding programs if it's available. And people always ask me about creep feeding programs, what I think. If you're a purebred operator, and even if not commercial, the cheapest gain you will ever put on that calf is on a creep feeder. Cheapest gain. Calves convert like crazy. As long as you can keep those calves eating about 1% of their body weight. Once a calf gets over about 1% of their body weight, then the economics starts going backwards on you. So you got to kind of try to maintain them at that. Be efficient with your feed utilization. You know, nutrition and reproductive performance are interrelated. You know, what does it cost? You know, people ask me, what does it cost to feed a cow? A lot of producers, we figure out $75 to $100 a liquid a cow, a bag to bag and a half of mineral, say $35 to $45 on mineral, and then you throw in 3 bales of hay. That's exactly, you know, that's what it's going to cost you that cow. You ought to be able to do it for, you know, around $200, $250 on a cow, depending on where you're at and what kind of forage that you have. So that's all I've got. I'd be glad to entertain any questions. Kind of cover some different areas about some different products. Yes, sir.
Wondering why you don't reshape your mineral tube, make it larger diameter and lower in height where it doesn't turn over when you put it in the fire.
Okay, trust me, I've complained enough to our guys on that. We have that same issue. You know, we have a 125-pound tub, and then our others are 225-pound. And something about those tubs over, but the best thing we've come up with is just get your 20-inch tire and drop them in those 20-inch tires, which is kind of hard to do. And sometimes those tubs, you know, there's different types of tubs, but there's really not. I understand where you're coming from on those tubs, so it's an issue. What?
Transportation?
On transportation?
You're shipping, it's easier to ship those inside the or smaller pallets.
Yeah, and they got to fit on a pallet, and that's one reason. We usually they're 225, we stick 8 to a pallet, so when we transport them, that's one reason that they're that size that they are. Yeah. But the easiest way to keep them from knocking them over when they get low and things, just stick them in a 20-inch tire. Some guys have gone and drilled holes in them, take them, and they'll chain them to, or tie them to some T-post. Another trick that the guys are doing on mineral, if you got deer, is that you take 2 T-posts, set them about that far apart, you can put those mineral tubs there, wire them to those mineral tubs, and deer will actually sometimes lick on them, and those bucks will come up there and they'll scratch on those T-posts and drop their sheds right there. So, and the one thing about our loose mineral is weatherized. You can take those round tubs, do the same thing, drill some little holes in there, and just pour that mineral inside those red tubs, and you got you a mineral feeder pretty cheap. Because water can go in there and drain off of there, and it won't brick up.
You said something about recycling the tub.
Yes, they are recyclable.
Who?
Do what?
Is your dealers take them back?
No, plastic recycling. So if you get, yeah. So that's a good idea, you know. Yep. Any other questions? I didn't talk anything about weaning calves or anything like that. October is National Sick Calf Month, you know. So you're weaning calves and everything, there's a good chance they're going to sick because it's supposed to get really cold tonight, tomorrow, so be thinking about that. I'll tell you, if you're weaning calves, put them on a good starter for at least 2 weeks, if not 3 weeks. Then you put them on anything you want to after that. Is that it? Oh, one more. What?
Do you have a list of suppliers
Get with us after then. We can find you a supplier where you're at. We have our web page out there, and on our website, we can go in and type in your zip code, and they'll tell you exactly what dealers there are. But we can help you find a dealer available out there. Just come find us at our booth later, and we'll be glad to entertain any questions when we get through. So, all right. Thank you very much.